Well, good morning, folks. Welcome to Lord's Day Live. Beautiful spring day here in Northeast Arkansas. The birds are chirping. It was cold and rainy and all that yesterday, but going to be a pretty day here. I hope it's a pretty day there as well. Did you set your clocks forward? Yeah. Before we went to bed, we all sprung forward, but I got to be honest with you, boy, it was hard getting up this morning. But being that you're with me, it's going to be a good day. You might notice that the map is missing. Yeah, and there's a reason for that, because all of a sudden we've got to employ 2 whiteboards. It's going to be a good morning. Got a lot to cover, though, and so hope you get out your papers. You're going to need several of them this morning, at least 2, and 2, yeah. So get out your papers, your pencils, and let's get ready to go, because it's time for Lord's Day Live Bible class. And you know what that means. Geo-History. Geo-History of the Bible. Let's see if I can take this off right here. It's kind of bugging me. There we go. Yeah. Geo-History of the Bible. You might recall I wrote this little book. Happy to send you a free copy in the mail, or not in the mail, as an email version. It's just cheap. I can do it, electronic, get it in the mail, all that kind of thing. Happy to send you one. We covered that earlier on, though, giving us the foundation that this book is well worth our investing in, memorizing more than anything else. This book is very important for us to memorize. And so because of that, then we launch into the rest of this thing with regards to the geography and the history of the Bible. In the future, this whiteboard is going to be used more for the geography end of it, and this one will be used more for the history end of it. We're going to see the two as they come together. But right now I'm going to have to reverse that, because, well, you'll see here in just a minute. Do you like to doodle? That's the question. Do you like to doodle? I think most folks do. And whether you rather think about it or not, if you're sitting at the restaurant waiting on your food to come, you're bored, whatever it may be, and you don't have your iPhone, because that seems to be the thing that mesmerizes everybody nowadays. You get out the napkin, you get out a pen, and you just kind of doodle, right? Everybody likes to doodle. It helps you to remember things. And so that's why we're employing doodling in our Bible class time, because it's very, very important for us to put these messages that I remember the book I showed you here. It is from God. Therefore, we need to internalize it, and we need to be able to share. We need to pull those things out, and we not have to run to the preacher every time we want to know where's the city of Antioch, or how to find Rome on the map. We ought to be able to get those out of our own mind. And so, some of this material, I hope, will help you to be able to do that. And so, here we go. As I already said, you need to get you out a piece of paper, because the first thing we're going to do is the timeline, which means I got to lay this aside, and I got to get out this, and we're going to go to our new whiteboard on this side here, because I want you to be able to compare 2 things. All right, let's review. Remember the timeline: dot, 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 line, dot, dot, dot. Remember that? The dot dots? Yeah, there you go. You getting all that? Good deal. I was trying to see if it's dark enough, and it looks like that's going to show up pretty good on our whiteboard. I like that. Dot, dot, dot. That means back in the day. We don't have a lot of information about that. And then this one, of course, is forward in the day. We don't have a lot of information about that. Here, way back at the beginning, what happens? God says, let there be. Remember that? Let there be. That's the opening. And then way over here at the conclusion, or at least the conclusion of our experiences, is us. That we don't have any more than that, right? And so this is you and I. And this is the creation story. Then we divide the timeline into 3 equal parts, each of them representing about 2,000 years. And again, all of this is rather approximate. And I might say this with regards to the map that we're going to doodle here in just a moment as well. It's very approximate as well. I'm not trying to give you specifics. I'm just trying to give you some hooks that you can hang these thoughts on, in your mind, so that you can pull them back out and use them when necessary. All right, first 2,000 years in, what happens? Major event. Remember, it's the guy in the tent. So you draw you a tent there, and who is that? Yep, that's Abraham. Okay? And then 2,000 years further, you draw you a cross, and of course, that's the most important character in all of history. That's Jesus. And a lot of folks ask, why didn't you put the birth of Christ there? And we talked about that in lessons gone by. But Jesus did not come to hang out with us so much. Although the book of Hebrews talks about how significant that was, Jesus came to die. He was born to die. This is where history changes. Not when he was born, although that's significant. History changes at his death, his burial, and his resurrection. Which, by the way, Romans chapter 6, verses 3 and 4 says that we duplicate when we are baptized. Really important passage. Okay, so you've got Creation, 2,000 years in, you got Abraham. 2,000 years in, you got Jesus. 2,000 years in, you got us approximately, which means the earth is, and I think the Bible bears this out, the earth is only about 6,000, 7,000 years old. And I do not believe in the evolutionary theories, and I don't believe in the gap theory either. I believe that back here today, I believe that these were literal days of creation. And one of the reasons that I've shared with you in the past is because I'm convinced that when God said that on the seventh day he rested from his work, therefore man should rest from their work during the Sabbath, that was the Old Testament law, then he's establishing a 24-hour day period that evidently happened all the way back in creation. And so anyhow, we've talked about that before. I'm not going to belabor that point. All right, so then what we do is we take and we divide the first 2,000 years. We're going to divide that in half, right? And we're going to draw us a little boat, which means that that is who? That's Noah, okay? And then you divide the second 2,000 years in half, and you draw yourself the Star of David, because that's when the kingdoms come in. And it's very important. We'll talk about the kingdoms later on in our discussion as we put the geography and the history together. And this will be very important for you to be able to recognize when that takes place. And then just 100 years in here, we draw us a copy of the Bible. Because 100 years into the first century, John's going to write some of the last material that we're going to record. The Holy Spirit will inspire for us. Paul's going to say earlier in the book of Galatians that once this thing is done, it's done. And you and I ought not to expect any more revelation with regard specifically to the gospel, because, in fact, anybody who shows up and says they've got an extra gospel, he said, let them be accursed, anathema. Don't pay attention to those folks. And in that passage, he actually gives that warning twice, and he refers to an angel from heaven. He says, even if an angel from heaven shows up and says, I've got an extra gospel for you, or an amendment to the gospel, or whatever it may be, he says, don't accept it. Why? Because the Bible's done, it's finished, it's complete, and you and I can trust in it. All right, so you've got the timeline up to that point so far. Now, there's a couple little things we have left yet that we still have to do. All right, so now you come to this very, very important period. Remember, I guess I could do this. Let's go like this. This is the period of the Jew. This is the time period where the Jewish people are going to be emphasized the most. Very significant emphasis on the Jew here, because they're going to not only provide but protect the lineage of Jesus. They're going to give us the types, the shadows, if you will, of what is to come with regards to church and things that we do within the church, etc., etc. The tabernacle, we'll talk about that in our study in times to come as well. And all of that's going to happen right here during this period of the Jew. Now, when Jesus comes, who is the Jew of all Jews, when Jesus comes, he's going to open things up again to all of the world. And so you don't have to become a Jew to become a Christian. You can just simply come to Christ. And that's very important. But it's significant in this period, this time period, which is going to be huge to our study, that we recognize the emphasis placed on the Jew, because that's going to be the subject matter. We're going to deal with them more than we're going to deal with anybody else. And so we need to take this very important time period and we need to divide it as well. So we put another little slash mark. So if you've got it, watch it. So we've got 2,000 years in is Abraham. Another 500 years in. What is that symbol going to be? Remember? See if I can draw it here. Yeah. 10 Commandments. So that's going to be Moses. So about 2,500 years into the timeline, we're going to get Moses. And then you got another slash over here, and it's actually, this is only, I'm going to put it right here, this is only about 400 years. Okay, but do you remember what our little thing was that we were trying to remember? Put a question mark inside that word bubble because we're trying to remember. Well, that's not very big, you can't see that, can you? But that's a word bubble, and it's got a question mark in it, and that's a period of silence, 400 years of silence, that God does not provide any prophecy until we get John the Baptist comes on the stage, and it's really good stuff from that point on. Okay, so here you've got the timeline that's very, very important. Now remember, I'll review this again someday, but we also did this 100-year period that's in here. Let's see if I can do it in red. I don't want to run out of time because I got a lot of stuff I need to cover here. Take this back to here. Okay, that 100-year period is also divided into 3 parts. You might recall, and we'll deal with that, we'll review that in another time. But remember how significant that the most important century in all of history is that 100-year period, beginning with the birth of Jesus and ending with the completion of the Bible. Well, again, we'll talk about that in the future. Okay, but I wanted you to see the timeline here because of what we're going to do as we progress on here. Okay, keep these two things in comparison. All right, next thing we need to do is the boot, blob, banana boat. You remember it? Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. Very important that we be able to have that little silly phrase. I get it, it's silly, but if you can remember it, it'll help you to recreate the Bible map, not only in your head, but put it on a piece of paper if you need to. Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. Let's say it again. Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. Can we do it one more time? Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. Now the reason that's important, you've seen this already, but remember, you got a boot, right? Everybody looks at Italy and they say, well, that looks like a boot. Yeah, it does. And that's where we're going to begin our little journey, if you will, with regards to recreating the Bible lands in our mind. So you got a boot, then you got a blob. And I guess I should do this. I was not wanting to write on here because it takes me so much time to erase it. But I need you to see it, so I'll go ahead and erase it. Okay, look, you got your boot, right? And then you got your blob. And this is very important because the blob comes in 2 segments. The upper half is largely Macedonia. There's another part, but I won't talk about it. And the bottom half is Achaia. So you got your boot, your blob, and then what do we got next? We got our banana, right? That's the shoreline, if you will, of didn't stay very. There you go. That's the shoreline of Asia Minor. Boot, blob, banana, and then here's your boat. Oops, wrote on the screen again. Every time I do that, and it scares me every time I do that, but it's okay, Sonny. You're going to be okay. Boot, blob, banana, boat, and then what's bubbles? That's right, bubbles. Remember, you put the first bubble, the island, right up here in the corner. Second bubble's kind of midway between the blob and the banana, and then your third bubble's over here. It's as if the boot is kicking the third bubble, right? Boot, blob, banana, boat with bubbles being balanced. You might remember we did the hand thing, right? Being balanced, almost like it's all being balanced on this guy's hand, being balanced by balloons. There's a balloon. You got the Persian Gulf that comes out of here. There's the Tigris. Euphrates is the one that's closest to us. And so all of a sudden you begin to see how the boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons take shape. Here's the being balanced and here's the balloon. First balloon, top one, Sea of Galilee, got the streamer coming from it. Dead Sea is kind of like a dead balloon. It's lost all its helium, it's just kind of hanging there. Same way with the Persian Gulf. It's kind of going south, but it's got 2 streamers coming out of it. The first one is the Euphrates and the second one is the Tigris. Questions? You got to post them on the screen if you got them because I can't see you if you don't. All right, we've got to take all of that off. This is the thing I was trying to avoid was the erasing part. That's why I got 2 whiteboards going on, so I didn't have to erase. I guess I'm going to have to get 3 whiteboards. Now, that would be excessive, wouldn't it? Okay. Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. Now what we need to do is we're going to draw it from memory. Are you with me? Let's draw it from memory, okay? Here's your piece of paper, and here's you and I going after it. First thing on our piece of paper, up in the top left-hand corner, we got us a boot, right? And then what do you got? You got your blob, boot, blob. Remember, none of these are not really proportional. I'm just trying to give you generals. General idea. Boot, blob. What is the next? Banana, right? And then you got your boat. Boot, blob, banana, boat. Bubbles with bubbles. So we got to get our islands over here. And remember the boot is kicking that third island. Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced. Remember that? Here, hand? Yeah. That's the Red Sea. Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside what? Balloons. Let's get over here and we'll get the Persian Gulf going. Euphrates River. And there, out of your brain, you have been able to draw the Bible lands. How cool is that, right? It's the Mediterranean Sea, obviously. You got Italy, you got Greece, you got Asia Minor. Isn't that neat? Boot, blob, banana boat with bubbles being balanced beside balloons. But now we've got to expand things, because you and I have already talked about that. How do you find Jerusalem? Remember us talking about that? How do you find Jerusalem on the map? Well, I'm dropping my thingy-dingies. There we go. How do you find Jerusalem on the map? You go to the top of the Dead Sea and slightly west, and you put you a dot. That's going to be the most famous city in all of the world. That's going to be Jerusalem. In fact, I'm going to write a big J here so that you get it. That's Jerusalem right there. Oh, is that going to be confusing to you? Maybe I shouldn't have done it there, because I don't want you to think that it's on the eastern side of the Jordan. It's not. It's on the western. So we'll do it this way. How's that? That's Jerusalem. That's Jerusalem. Now, everything else we're going to talk about is going to be in relationship to Jerusalem. You start with Jerusalem. Start with the big J. And then we'll move from there and we'll find other things on the map. For instance, and again, there's a lot of Bible teachers out there. I'm thinking they're going to say, well, I have other major cities that I would have put out there. And you're probably right. There's a lot of major cities in the Bible. But I've tried to select certain major cities that are very significant to giving us a general spot that we can relate other things in that region to. That's why I've selected these particular ones. And so I hope that you'll just forgive me. From Jerusalem, if you were to travel straight north, so we're going to go, now I'm not going to draw the arrows, but if you go straight north, you don't quite go to the point. It's just south of the point. But this city is Antioch. Antioch. Now, it's going to be a very important city to Paul, who's going to launch out on missionary journeys and that kind of thing. And so Antioch, and that'll give us a regional spot that we can help, you'll understand. It helps us to place some things on the map later on. Now, if you'll travel about 3/4 of the way into our banana, so it's a 3/4 banana. 3/4 of the way into the banana, this is where you're going to get the city of Ephesus. Ephesus. We got a book written to the church at Ephesus, right? The book of Ephesians. And so that's a very important, and that's going to help us to identify various cities that are in Asia Minor. If you can get Ephesus in your head, then you're going to be pretty good. Now up here, and I should have drawn it this way, I didn't, just because it's easier to draw the blob that way, but that's actually a landmass, okay? It connects, okay? And up here, about midway between the blob and the banana, right about here, you're going to find another very, very important city, another church that a book was written to by Paul in the Bible, and this one's called Philippi. Philippi, and by the way, Philippi, the PP, the two P's, that's what always gets me. There's two P's in that one, Philippi, so I'm going to spell that one out for you. All right, so you've got Jerusalem, straight north you got Antioch. About 3/4 of the way through the banana, you got Ephesus. And then between the banana and the blob, you got Philippi. And then down here in the blob, two very important cities. But watch how I place these, okay? The first one is right here at the bottom of the first half of the blob. But you need to know that, okay? That's Athens, okay? That's Athens. And then slightly south and west of Athens, another city, and that one's Corinth. And again, we've got another book, do we not? Actually, got two of them, right? The books of 1st and 2nd Corinthians are written to the churches at Corinth. All right? Then we're going to travel from there over here to the boot. To the boot. You need to come up almost to the top of our boot, at least in my picture, and draw you one right on this side, on the western side, the left side, and that is the city of Rome. Very, very important city of Rome. Okay. Now, if you can get all of those cities then in your head, it's going to help you not only with the travels of Paul, but it's going to help you with other things that we'll talk about later on. Now, I'm going to give you two more. These are actually Old Testament cities in their significance, but it's very important for you to have them as well, although I'm putting them secondary because the majority of the information we want to talk about is New Testament, right? But this is very important to our Old Testament study, which is where we're going to start. If you were to go straight east of Jerusalem, let's just draw you a line straight east of Jerusalem and put you a dot. That city would be Ur of the Chaldees. That's important because Ur is where Abraham is going to start out. But then if you were to travel northward up the Euphrates just a little bit like that and put another dot, that one is going to be the city of Babylon. Babylon. And Babylon, if you need a reference point for modern day history, the ancient ruins of Babylon lie about 60 miles south of the city of Baghdad today, okay? But that's where Babylon is. Now, I'm not going to really require that you remember that much at this particular point, but those are going to become important when we deal with Old Testament history. One last thing that I wanted to share with you is I Googled this, and I said, how far is it between Jerusalem and Rome? And it's just shy of 1,500 miles, I'm told. Just shy of 1,500 miles between those two. To give you a reference point, that is, let's see, what was it? That's approximately New York City to Houston, Texas. About that distance, if you can kind of picture that on your own, in your mind, on your own American map. Okay, that's how far it is from Jerusalem, as the crow flies, from Jerusalem to Rome. All right, there you go. Questions, comments? All right, gonna move. All right, Q&A, but you can't do Q&A because you got you've got my map. I gotta erase the map. We can't have that. Oh, that's not coming off very good. And then remember where I hit that thing and it went on the screen? Oh my, I can't believe I did that. All right, here we go. I'm sorry, it's a little bit messy, but I think it'll be okay. All right, Q&A. Teachers, get out your phones, get ready to take pictures of this. Can you complete the memory phrase, bloop, blah, banana? Can you finish it? Number 2, how can you locate the city of Jerusalem using the memory phrase? 3, how can you locate Antioch using the memory phrase? 4, how can you locate Ephesus and Philippi using the memory phrase? And then number 5, how can you locate Athens, Corinth, and Rome using the memory phrase? If you do that, boot, blah, banana boat, with bubbles being bounced beside balloons, if you're paying attention, you just got the answer to number 1. If you can do that, then you're going to have all those locations that are going to be there for you. And by the way, teachers, you could also go here and ask them to explain to you and review with you how to put the timeline together, because that's very, very important to our subject matter. All right. Quick announcement, commercial moment, if you will. I'm coming to the great state of Louisiana in the coming months. March the 24th, I'm going to be at the Pine Prairie Congregation. The 26th, I'll be speaking at the what do they call that thing? They call that the Crusade. That's going to be held at the Oak Grove Church of Christ, which is over near Amite, south of Amite, north of Hammond, and Independence, that area. Come and be with me for those 2 things. And then in April, you see that one. But I'm coming your way. If you live in Louisiana, I'd love to hug your neck. It'd be fun to get to be with you. All right, prayer time. We've got some things that need to be considered this morning, and not the least of which is the plane crash that happened, where they're reporting it right now. We use that as our last one to talk about. But again, I got really no information on Ashley's mother, but I'm assuming that good news with regards to the brain surgery that she had. Velma continues to struggle, although doing a little bit better. Please remember her daughters as they care for her. I love these 2 women very much, and they can get exhausted real easily trying to care for their mother. And by the way, let's just add, while we're doing this, let's just add all the others of you out there. I know there's several of you who are caring for your aged mother or father, and I know that can be quite a load to care or to bear, and to care for those individuals as they cared for you when you were a child. Obviously, it's something that's our responsibility. We do it out of love, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't take a lot of energy and time and money and things of that nature. So let's remember those who are dealing with aging parents. Denise, still struggling with her leg. I'm not sure. I haven't talked to her in a little while. I need to ask her this morning as I rush off to my home congregation if she's made a decision with regards to that. But either way, it's a real struggle for her. And Denise means a lot to our MAP program. She's our head cook. So remember Denise in your prayers, please. Tina and Linda both trying to deal with breast cancer and put that behind them. Tina has some other issues that she's dealing with. And Linda, I've lost track. I'm hoping we're down to 4 weeks left maybe of chemotherapy, Linda, something like that. Give me a note so I can make sure I update that. But let's remember these two wonderful ladies. Let's remember Deborah of Kentucky, as she's just asked in general that we keep her in our prayers, and I appreciate that, and I'm more than happy to do that because I need you to pray for me in general as well. Lecky's daughter, I'm told you she's healing well, and the surgery went well on her foot, so we're glad about that. Luke, continue to remember him with regards to epilepsy and horrible headaches. Denise in Louisiana wants us to remember her family and specifically her grandchildren, which we are thrilled to do. And then to the plane crash. Ethiopian Airlines is what I'm getting this morning. And I'm told that there was 157 folks on board. It crashed shortly after takeoff. The 8 there is to represent the fact that I'm told there were at least 8 Americans on board. And so folks who are close to home, they lost their lives in this horrible plane crash. And we don't really know, at least they're not reporting at present, as to what the cause of that plane crash was, but we need to keep our eye on that. And we need to be mindful of those individuals. I wish that you would join me on Fridays at 11 o'clock for Last Days Live. We're talking about a lot of things that are happening in our world and some of the tragedies that are taking place, and the fact that we need to be ready for the return of Christ, because I believe that's the next big thing on the horizon. And a lot of our family members are at best nominal, just go to church a couple times kind of Christians, and that's not going to get it. The Lord is returning for the passionate. He is returning for those who have really completely and totally vested themselves in Him. Showing up at church, once or twice a week, it just isn't going to get it. Are you part of the passionate? Which is going to, by the way, lead me into my last of a 5 or 6 part series on involvement. So I hope you'll stick around for the sermon time here in just a moment. But anyhow, there's the prayer list. Let's remember all of them, especially this one as it's happening right now. And a lot of folks are mourning and they're trying to deal with the horrible nature of this. And let's remember them on our prayers, okay? That leaves me, it looks like about 3 minutes. I'm going to step out of the way. And I'm going to ask you to spend the next few minutes in prayer as I try to get the next thing set up for our sermon time. Good morning, folks, and again, welcome to Last Days Live. Glad to have you along for the ride. I pray that it'll be a blessing to you this morning. Those of you who have been with me for a while, you might recall that we are dealing with involvement in our sermon time. And so I've taken the word involvement, as you know, and this is, by the way, our 5th installment on this. We will have one more, which is going to be somewhat of a review. I'm going to lead you through a series of application questions, etc. But involvement number 5, I took this and we had an introductory lesson, as you might recall. We compared Matthew chapter 28 with Acts chapter 2, right? And then we divided the word into these segments, and I took the I, in, and included. That was our first lesson after the introduction. And then VOL, voluntary, VE, vested. That was last time. And then mentored. That's our subject matter for today. Mentored. As you can see here in the bottom, I do this. I'd love to come to your congregation and present this material. If you are interested, let me know. You can contact me. Just put Sonny at the front of this. Sonny@sonnychilds.com. That's my email. And I'd love to hear from you. All right, let's go after this. Matthew chapter 28. We're going to end where we began. Matthew chapter 28 seems to me to be some of the most important words in all of the Bible, because these are some of the last words of Jesus before he leaves the planet. And he's giving those final assignments out. He's saying, this has to be done before I come back. Make sure you get after this business. Now, it's been 2,000 plus years since he left us. I get that. But that doesn't mean he's not coming back, and it doesn't mean that the urgency of our assignment is any less. In fact, I would say the closer we get to the return of Christ, it probably takes on a great deal of more urgency and intensity with regards to how we should fulfill the commands, the great, the prime directive that he has given us, etc. Matthew 28, then Jesus came to them, and he said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. There are 4 times in this passage that he refers to himself. One of them I'm not going to emphasize, this idea of the Son. Obviously, he is the Son. But I've circled 3 other times on the screen that I think is important for us to recognize with regards to mentoring someone, how personal Jesus took this journey, how personally he took his own mentoring assignment from his Father. Notice that he says that all authority has been given to him. Then he comes on down here and he tells us that we need to teach everything that he commanded. And then lastly, he says, I'm going to be with you to the very end of the age. These are 3, that's 4. These are 3 points that I think are very significant as we begin to wrap up this subject of involvement with regards to mentoring and how we draw others into the programs of the church and the activities of the church. It's not good enough to get them in the water and baptize them and they come up and they're a new creature and then we let them just sit on the pew and watch us all do it all. No, they've got to be involved. But sometimes most of the time, if not all of the time, it requires some mentoring for them to recognize where they fit and what they can do and how to do it appropriately, etc. That's why it's important for us to recognize that an individual who comes to Christ comes to us as a newborn child. They're a baby. And just like we have to continue to work with and help to mature the children in our own lives, the same thing is true at church. And when an individual comes to us as a newborn Christian, then we have to step up and we've got to become mentors. And here are 3 areas I see Jesus pointing to with regards to his own mentorship, if that's a word, and therefore the perfect example for you and I. Let's pick them apart together. First of all, took the passage, put it over here, going to put our 3 points on the right as you can see. First of all, he says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. All authority. We most often hear preachers talk about this particular passage or this particular line as being, okay, Jesus is in control. It's his church. We need to let him rule. I think appropriately so. Many preachers might use this passage to say that the Pope is using inappropriate power over individuals on the planet as if he is the representative of Christ on earth. He is not. Jesus talked about how he would be represented on earth, and that was through the Holy Spirit, not the Pope. All authority has been given to him. All authority is given to Jesus. And we often talk about the power with regards to that. But I want to look at another side of that sometimes, matter of fact, I've never heard an individual actually referenced before. And that is the responsibility that comes with having that authority. Jesus knew it. He recognized it. It's why he goes to the garden and he prays to his Father, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done, because he knew in the back of his head that he had to go through that in order for us, those who are being mentored, in order for us to have any hope of ever coming into the presence of God. And so he was willing to take responsibility, if you will. He had to do the tough stuff. Now, obviously, he was the perfect example, and so I can't point to any places where he made mistakes. But by way of application for you and I in the church, those of us who are leaders, if you're an elder, if you're a preacher, if you're a deacon, Sunday school teacher, you got somebody looking at you, understand this. You need to take responsibility. You got to step up. And that means, if you will, the buck stops here. Remember President Truman used to have a little sign on his desk, the buck stops here? I'm told, by the way, that little sign was sent to him by a prison warden. A prison warden who evidently used that as somewhat of a way to encourage the prisoners. The buck stops with you. You're not here because of anybody else. You're here because of the poor choices that you made. Well, the same thing is true of elders and preachers and deacons, etc. We need to make sure that we take responsibility. I've known many elders, I've known many preachers and deacons across the line that I've lived, and that it seems like that they were willing to blame anybody and everybody else for the problems of the church, but they weren't themselves willing to. When's the last time you saw an elder sitting on the front pew confessing his sins to the church? I could be better. I need to be better. I made this mistake, etc. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I've certainly seen it happen myself, but it doesn't happen with great regularity, and I'm not so sure but what it ought not happen more so for them with great regularity than maybe anybody else in the church, because they have such a burden. They have such a load on their shoulders, may I say it? They have such a responsibility. And so the first thing I would share with you, as Jesus takes this mentoring idea very, very personal, we ought to take it very personal. It's not just that you've been given the blessings of the authority of the gospel to share that with the world, but you're also responsible with how you present that. Are you using all the technology that's available to you? Are you using all the time that's available to you? All the advantages that you have, are you using your advantages for the advantage of God? It's your responsibility. And when you're not very effective, when you're not working hard, etc., it's your responsibility to own up to that and to confess it. So number one, Jesus took on, he felt a very intense personal responsibility to deal with all of those and to take care of all those he was mentoring. Thus, you got the prayer in the garden. You've got Jesus hanging on the cross when all he had to do is whisper the words, and God could have sent the angels to destroy the planet, but he does not. He uses self-discipline to hold things back on behalf of me, the one who's being mentored. If you're a church leader, you're responsible, and you need to act like it. Number two, it's not just responsibility, but it's also training. Notice also, as you progress through this passage, you come on down here, he tells us that we need to do a lot therefore. Because I've got the authority, here's the assignment. I want you to go and I want you to make disciples. That's interesting. The word disciple means student. And so we are called to make students of the student. I'm the student. So I make students of me, the student, because I'm a student of the teacher. And so it's why the subject, the discussion about judging. You know, you often hear folks, especially those who are mentally lazy, who say, you shouldn't judge me. Don't judge me. Well, that's just simply not Bible. We are called to judge. We're just called that when we judge, we're supposed to use the appropriate parameters with regards to the judgments that we make. Make sure we got all the information, etc. But even at the end of the day, with regards to judgment, we need to understand that judging is essentially passing along the judgment of the judge. Jesus already addressed this. He already addressed that particular subject. Let me give you an aside. I had somebody challenge me just recently about Jesus and whether or not he ever addressed homosexuality. And he did. And by the way, I'll share that with you in weeks to come perhaps, but he actually did. And because of the way Jesus deals with that particular subject, I, as a gospel preacher, have no right other than to pass along the judgment of the judge. What did the judge judge with regards to homosexuality? It's a perversion. It's not of God. And therefore, I, as a preacher, call me what you want. Call me a bigot. Call me all I'm telling you is what Jesus told you. If you want to argue with somebody, argue with God. And so I pass along the judgment of the judge. Well, now come back to our subject matter. The same thing is true of anything with regards to our spirituality, and that is, in the training process, my job is just to tell you what he commanded. That's a big word, commanded. There are many who would suggest that in Scripture that we're supposed to just do everything, even with regards to examples, but that gets a little weird. Because if I'm supposed to obey every example, does that mean I have to ride a donkey? Do I have to ride a camel? Do I have to, the church, by the way, Acts chapter 2, it says that they got together every day. Do I have to be in church every day? If you're going to follow examples and take that to, it's going to get a little odd. But one thing I can say to you and prove to you, because it's right in front of you in black and white, Jesus did say, everything I commanded, you've got to command. Now, we can argue over example, necessary inference, and all that at another time, but the one thing I can assure you is this. If he commanded it, we've got to command it. I'm only comfortable, frankly, with drawing lines of fellowship when it comes to those things which he has commanded. Because I think that that's obviously what he says in this particular passage. I had something else I wanted to say about that. Oh yeah, Romans chapter 4, verse 15. Romans 4 and 15 says, there is no law. Where there is no law, there is no transgression of that law. In other words, you can't break a law that's never been given. And so if Jesus commanded it, we command it. If he didn't command it, we must not command it, and we can't do either of the two things. My fellowship is really big on this law of silence, which I'm convinced is not a biblical law at all, but my fellowship often likes to say, okay, if the Bible doesn't say you can, then you can't. No, that's making up a law too. If the Bible doesn't address it, if Jesus doesn't specifically say it, if it's not something that's addressed even by principle, then you and I have one obligation, and that is to keep our mouth shut on it. We ought not make a validation, and we ought not make a condemnation. Both of those are violating the authority of Scripture. And so he says here, number 2, if we're going to involve people as far as being a mentor is concerned, we need to take responsibility. Then number 2, we need to train these folks. But as you're going to see in the next lesson, as we come through a list of things with regards to how you can apply this, it's very important that we only command what Jesus has commanded. Our world, Christendom in general, is massively divided over what a bunch of men have put together. And so we've got our creeds, and we've got our quotations from Reformation leaders, and sometimes even Restoration leaders, which, by the way, is inappropriate. You don't base your doctrine on a Restoration leader or a Reformation leader or the Pope. That's man's stuff. Teaching his doctrines, the commandments of men. Jesus condemned that. Who do we teach? Only what the Lord has commanded. And so my responsibility for you is simply to say what the Bible has said. In other words, I'm going to let the Bible interpret the Bible. Let the Bible speak. If the Bible commands it, then we're going to draw lines of fellowship with regards to that based upon that command. But if it doesn't, we got to be really careful there. So number 2, we need to, as mentors, make sure that we are mentoring our people to recognize the commands of Christ, not the opinions of Sonny or the opinions of men. What does Jesus specifically say on that topic? And then number 3. Notice also that he says, and surely I will be with you always to the very end of the age. Participation with regards to being a mentor. Participation is huge. That we participate in what is taking place. Again, next time when we talk about the various application questions, I'm going to ask you with regards to the leadership of your congregation, can you close your eyes right now and envision your elders, your preacher, whatever, doing just about anything as far as the work of the church is concerned? Let's go to cleaning the toilets. You've got somebody maybe at your congregation, maybe they're getting paid a little bit of money to do that. Can you see your elders doing that? Can you see your preacher doing that? Participation. There's a restaurant, I'm told, I don't know if they do it anymore, but there's a major chain in the world that once a year, I don't remember what the day is, but once a year, the management actually comes down and they participate in the hands-on operation, and in this particular restaurant, they make the hamburgers and they fry the fries and all of that. There's not only one advantage to that, there's at least 2. One, obviously, is the advantage that they are people who can relate then to those who work below them. But number 2, it puts them in a position where they have to demonstrate an element of humility because they participate as well. Remember, elders, you are only in that position by the grace of God and as a substitute shepherd. Remember that. And so you're just as much a sheep as the next guy. You need shepherding just as much as the next guy. You need to participate just as much as the next guy. Participation is huge with regards to this particular subject. All right, I want to share with you this little poem I wrote years ago. I think it ends this 5 parts, at least up to this point, it ends it pretty well. To be a great leader or mentor. A leader can do many things to show the worth his vision brings. With eloquence he can explain in speech or song with sweet refrain. But often words cannot embrace the vision he's seen face to face. He needs a way to show them more. He wants to make their spirits soar. When leaders want their vision caught, sometimes the best way it is taught is not with props or fancy talk, but invitation for a walk. They reach the place to see the view. The teacher takes position new. The two now stand there side by side. The leader is no longer guide. With open hand, he points ahead to lessons that are best unsaid. As leader, he's thought very wise, because students see with open eyes. You see participation in that? It's true that there's a point in time in our life that we as mentors we have to engage in a lot of instruction. But if you're doing your job well, there's also going to become a time when you step beside your student and you say, see it? There it is. Wow. Isn't that something? And we participate because we are sheep just as they are. That's why we go back to that earlier phrase with regards to commands. We teach the commands of Jesus because he's the only shepherd. All of us are sheep. So involvement. Included, voluntary, vested, mentored. 3 steps with regards to mentoring others. Number 1, as a mentor, you got to take responsibility. The buck stops here. Number 2, as a mentor, you've got to understand that the training you provide comes from the master himself. The master mentor, Jesus Christ. Only command that which he has commanded. Don't make up your own personal opinions and teach them as if they were the doctrines of Christ. And then number 3, participation. We need to actually be involved, engaged, because we're sheep just like the rest of them. Next time, I want to, in the next lesson, go back through all of these, all 5 of them actually, and I'm going to provide you a series of, they could be discussion questions. They're leading questions so that you can either personally take a test and look down through these and ask yourself how you're doing, how your congregation is doing. Be a great little test for the leadership of the congregation to take. But I present it primarily so that a congregation using this particular series could do some self-examination, open this up for discussion, print them off, send home with your folks and ask them to kind of take an assessment of where we're at with regards to these kind of things. And so next time we'll go through a series of questions actually that will help us to take this and put it in a real personal way, put it into our lives as far as the congregation is concerned. I'm coming to the great state of Louisiana. I already mentioned that during the Bible class, but by way of advertisement, let me say it one more time. You see the dates there. If you live in Louisiana and anywhere near those congregations, I would sure love to come and to see you or have you come and see me, depending on how that would work out. I'd love to hug your neck. And so if you're in the area, please let me know. Well, there you go, folks. That's the sermon for Lord's Day Live. I pray that it's been a blessing. We're approaching the end of this particular series. Next time, as I said, will be somewhat of a review, but I pray that involvement is something you understand better now and that perhaps you're doing something within your own congregation to develop that involvement. If you'd like to have me come and present this series to your home congregation as a seminar, I would be honored to do that. I ask 2 things. Number 1, that you provide my travel expenses and put me up somewhere when I get there. And number 2, doesn't matter how much it is, but if you could give some kind of a gift as far to help our ministry continue. I don't have any set fees for that kind of thing, but it would be a blessing. I'd love to come to your congregation and do this. All right, next live thing is Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I pray that you will be, not 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. This is 9 o'clock, isn't it? 9 o'clock, Lord's Day Live. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, Monday Morning Live. And then on Fridays at 11 o'clock, we do Last Days Live. And I'd love for you to join me for all of those. SonnyChilds.com. You can go there and get all the ones that have been recorded in the past, and they're archived there. Let's see, SonnyChilds.com, top right-hand corner, audio/video. Hit that link. It'll take you there to where you need to be to see all of these. I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/SonnyChilds. Thank you for joining me this morning. I pray that your day is a big blessing and that the Lord's day will be bright wherever you happen to be. This is Sonny Chow saying, be there, Matthew 16:26.